This is Single Status.
Hello, Single Status family. Welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, Samantha, and I'm so happy to see your beautiful faces today. We have my friend Jenna Holt on the podcast today. We have such a fun conversation. She is a working young professional, and she is currently running for Miss Michigan. She competes in pageants, and we kind of dive into the pageant world and how she got started in there, and how to not fall into comparison, and that so many of us deal with even in this social media age, and just we go into how to be confident in yourself and how to boldly, walk in the gifts that God gave you. So stay for the whole episode. And I just want to remind you, if you don't already, to make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok. My links are below at Samantha Venue. And if you could write a review on Apple, if you could rate the show on Apple or Spotify, 5-star rating, I would so much appreciate it. And don't forget, we are also on YouTube. You can watch the show there, hit that subscribe button, and I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, guys, we have Jenna Holt here, who is a friend now, but yes. We have a mutual friend, one of my best friends from college, shout out to Jackie, introduced me to Jenna, and we just have so much in common, and we literally just met for the first time. We've been following each other on social media, but yeah, she is just, you guys have to follow her on Instagram, because your Instagram is just... It's amazing.
It's something crazy.
No, it's so legit. But this girl is a powerhouse in business. She's in pageants. You are just killing it. So let's tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to the Single Status family.
Okay. Hey, fam. I'm Jenna. I am a Michigan native, and I have relocated all over the country, and as Sam was alluding to with my my business exposure, so I've been in the automotive industry for a long time, but my job now, I have been with General Motors now for 6 years. And so I've lived in Connecticut, California, Indiana, and now back in my home state of Michigan, our home state of Michigan, and been doing that all for work. And on the side, when I'm not working and doing all these other things, I compete in pageantry. So that's my heart hobby, I call it. It's just something that I got into because of some really good girlfriends of mine. And I just got bit by the bug, and I haven't really turned back. And it's changed my life in a lot of great ways. But yeah, aside from cars and pageantry, I just bought my first house last year in Michigan,
awesome.
And I'm actually getting chickens tomorrow. And,
oh my gosh!
Yeah, so and I'm getting honeybees next month.
What?
So I'm falling victim to this house. What's it called when you're homesteading?
Farm girl house?
Yeah. And I'm really not but I've always loved gardening, and I grew up having chickens. And so, I always envisioned when I would get my own house that I would do these things and, have my own vegetable garden. And, I love flowers, and, I love the idea of having fresh eggs.
That is so awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you follow me on Instagram, you don't know what you're going to get. It's honestly, it's a little trick bag of, you're either going to get pageant stuff, home stuff, volunteer stuff, work stuff. It's a smorgasbord, but all a part of who I am.
Yes, I love that, because you seem like you live an exciting life because you're super busy. You keep yourself busy. Mm-hmm. But I think it is important to have things at home that bring you peace. And it seems like these chickens and these honeybees and whatever.
That's so true. Those things that are familiar and things that I had in my life growing up that I want to implement in my adult life, because I still I love them and cherish them. So
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
And if you think about it, there's probably things even for you as an adult, and for the listeners, same thing. It's okay, what things have you implemented in your life as an adult because of your upbringing?
Yes.
And for me, being like self-sufficient in those, even in those small ways, play a big part.
Yes, that's so true, because I think as we, in like high school, college, like that phase, you kind of lose, or at least I kind of lost myself for a minute. And then you have to kind of go back to what brings me peace and joy and like the little things in life, and start reincorporating those into your life.
Yeah.
It's so important, and it helps with balancing all the busyness of everything.
For sure.
It's good to unplug.
Yeah, for sure. It's those things that you look forward to going home and like unwinding.
Yes.
And there's not this like built up pressure on your shoulders from the day-to-day tasks. You can go home and just
Right.
Here's the comfort, here's the familiarity.
Yeah.
And so for me, like buying my first home, like, you know, there's a lot of comfort in that. It's like, oh, I get to go home to like this building that like I bought.
Yeah.
So then I get to fill it with the things that make me happy and fill me with joy. And so chickens and bees and gardening, you know, all of those things come along with it. And my plants, I'm a huge, you know, plant mom. So, I mean,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. There's so many directions we could
I
take
know.
this conversation. So let's start with, because we're talking about home ownership.
Yeah.
So you live by yourself. You bought a home on your own.
Yeah.
You're 29. Like, how amazing. Congratulations. That's a huge step.
Yeah.
To be able to buy a house on your own. And I have if you listen on Apple or Spotify, I actually have like a Rocket Mortgage ad that plays for home ownership. But a lot of single people feel like they can't buy a house by themselves because one, it's expensive, and it's just like a lot to keep up with. So how has home ownership been for you so far?
I will say it's been very gratifying, because it was such a strenuous journey to get to where my house is and be able to do it.
Yeah.
But I can resonate with the idea of not wanting to be a single person buying a house, because then there is something to be said in being established and like planting your roots somewhere. But I think most of single people are willing to venture wherever their potential future partner is going to be. And so maybe there's a part, at least for me, I feel like, okay, I have this house now, so I'm kind of grounded where I am. I can't just up and leave, a month from now if I feel like doing whatever, or if I, fall in love with somebody, I can't just like up and like leave my house. Like I own it, It's not like when you're renting and you can break a lease or whatever. It's so there is a huge gratification for me that I bought this on my own, but there's the other part of me that's like, oh, well, this freedom that I have, there's also a price with that freedom. And that's the fact that I can't just up and leave. Like right. I have a duty to keep my house from falling apart, and paying the bills. Like, I am responsible for that. No one else is going to do it.
Yeah.
So there's, it's super great to have something of my own, but I can understand why people who are single may have that bit of hesitation, because you still want to have that freedom, because you want to like maybe have that as a goal achieved with the person you want to like spend your life with, for example. Yeah. And,
Yeah. I've kind of looked at it as, with my house now, I know that it's not my forever home. I know
exactly.
I feel like I will get married one day, have the family and everything, and I would hope to kind of move into a different house with that person.
Totally.
But it'll be nice to maybe keep this as an investment property or rent my house out. So that's kind of how I see it. So that's super, super cool. There's so many different options that we could take there.
Right. And even like people have asked me like, oh, like if you're planning on, if this is not your forever home, because it's not. I bought a house in my hometown. Yeah. And that was not a part of my plan at all, to have my house in my hometown. So I know that's not the forever, but then I've been asked like, oh, like, well, what would you want to do afterwards? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, would I want to keep it and be a landlord? I honestly don't know. Yeah. Because even the idea of buying a house a year and a half ago, it was not on my radar.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I will say, like a little piece of advice is like, yeah, it's awesome that like, you and I, like we're single women and we're able to afford buying this house. Like if I can give any advice, like I was not financially prepared. And like, I think that's another reason why the journey took so long, because if I had saved more money going into my home search, I could have potentially afforded getting a house sooner.
Okay.
But I was not financially stable.
Ready. Yeah.
And so you just, yeah. And I guess it's easy to say that, hindsight's 2020, right? But it's almost like you have to be prepared for those things before you actually anticipate them.
Right.
Like people might feel that way about marriage, like, paying for a wedding or like maybe having a kid, like how much do those things cost, and like having a house. Okay. Having that money to invest into those things.
Right. Thinking about it.
You can never be prepared too soon.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
So,
yeah. It's so important to save for the things that we want, and renting, we're kind of just throwing money out the door. So if we can save our money and buy a house as soon as possible, it's an investment into our future, you know?
And not falling to like, for me, like I struggle with just straight up materialism, right? Like I want nice things and I want new things and I want expensive things.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, like if I thought, and even pageantry, like I invest so much in pageantry. I literally think I could have all my student loans paid off and probably had a way bigger down payment for my house if I didn't have such an expensive hobby. Straight up. Like, and I think there's probably a lot of listeners that can relate to that. They're like, oh yeah, of course I could have a car, or of course I could probably buy a house if I gave up X, Y, Z. But it's so hard to give up X, Y, Z because like,
you like it,
life's
and
vanities,
it's fun.
right? Yeah.
So, okay, let's get into the pageantry now that you teed us up there. So let us know, like, how did you get into this? How does it work? Like, why are you passionate about this? Yeah, let us know the inside scoop.
Sure.
I don't think I've ever talked to anyone that's actually in pageant, so I'm excited about this.
So I did my very first pageant when I was a junior in high school. It was Miss Davison, and the only reason why I did it is because my two best childhood friends were doing it, and they were like, we're going to the informational call, and I'm like, oh, I'll go too, whatever, like I'll check it out. And so we sat in on that call, and it was just this in person, like at lunch hour or whatever. And so we all said we were going to do it together. And well, fast forward like 2-3 months, I ended up winning Miss Davison. And I mean, I walked into that pageant not having that expectation at all.
Wow.
And it was a scholarship program. So like I won some scholarship money, and like that was really cool. And the whole purpose of it was to obviously build skills for, young women that are in high school. And there's an interview portion and then a business wear portion and a gown, of course.
And how fun to get dressed up. And,
it's so fun.
Yeah.
It's so fun. And I had a great year as Miss Davison. And that's actually where I met my best friend now. She was my first runner-up. And how Miss Davison works is you have your first runner-up and your second runner-up as your court. And the three of you travel across the state together to do volunteer stuff together.
Okay.
So her and we became best friends, and we've been best friends since, over 10 years later. So I would like to think that honestly she was probably the reason why I won, which like that's kind of like a light bulb moment. But like I cherish her friendship so much that if it wasn't for Miss Davison, I wouldn't have her, I don't think.
Wow.
Not to the capacity that her and I are now. So she and another one of her college girlfriends were competing in the Miss America system, and I didn't have really any interest in continuing pageantry into college. Like I had other interests and I did other things, and I saw them compete for Miss Michigan in 2017, and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks like so much fun. Mm-hmm. I should be up there with them. So literally later that fall, I got with them, and they like helped prep me to be ready to go on stage and compete at the local level, because in the Miss America system, you need to win a local in order to go to state.
Okay.
And so they like prepped me, and I went out and I competed, and I did my first one. It was like right in like near Davison in the Lapeer area. And I went in there and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so fun. I'm having a great time. I was not competitive. No way. Totally not. Just so many little things that like I look back now and I'm like, yeah, that was definitely like, these were all rookie mistakes. But that's how you learn. Yeah, that's how you grow. Right? Yeah, exactly.
With anything new we do,
right,
we're going to make mistakes. We're going to not know what's going on for a minute and learn and grow. And
literally the best way to learn is to fail, right?
Exactly.
So definitely failed. And fast forward a couple of months, I had competed in a couple other locals. And then I ended up finally winning one. And I went to Miss Michigan with both of them because they had won local titles as well. And so the three of us got to compete together at Miss Michigan the following year. And that was awesome. I absolutely loved the experience. That was in 2018. And that's when I started my career with GM.
Okay.
So I had to move. So I continued my pageant competition over in California. So I competed in California for 2 years, and then COVID happened, and there was some delays in that competition year. So I ended up actually keeping the local title that I had at the time for 2 years. And then I ended up having to move to Indiana for work. And so I competed for Miss California 2 months after I had relocated to Indiana. But because of COVID, there was like some forgiveness and grandfathering in and all that stuff. Then I ended up competing for Miss Indiana USA the following year. So that was my first year doing the USA system, which I would say is fairly distinguishable from Miss America. Like Miss America is the one that has a talent portion, and Miss USA does not. Miss America has a 10-minute interview, whereas Miss USA usually has like a 2 to 5 minute interview. Miss USA has a swimsuit portion, whereas Miss America has like an active wear portion. So there's some distinctions between the two systems. But what I will say, with competing from them all, I've found such amazing community of women in all the places I've competed in, you know, despite being different systems. Like I have stood in several girls' weddings.
Wow.
From pageantry. Like literally 3. And I'm standing in another one this summer in California from one of my girlfriends that I met out there. And so pageantry has been just a really great outlet for me and a really great hobby, because as much as I just said about like investing into this hobby, it's very expensive. I've gained so much more back from it, and it may not be monetary, but so much more in like personal growth and these friendships that I know are lifelong. And I know they say that it's cliche, but like the women literally that are going to be standing in my wedding are the ones that I've met throughout like pageantry and beyond. So I'm competing for Miss Michigan USA this upcoming April. And
awesome.
Yeah, I wasn't supposed to compete. The age limit was lifted last year. So last year was supposed to be my last year competing in Michigan, and the limit was 28 years old. Okay. And so then late last year, they announced that they were removing the age limit, and so I could come back and compete again.
Awesome. Look at that.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Here I am showing up.
Yes, take those limits off. Age should not matter.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So it's great that the organization, you know, encourages women of all ages to still pursue this dream and pursue what benefits the organization can bring to each individual woman. And I definitely feel that way. So I'm excited to take part of it again.
Cool.
Yeah.
And okay, so I've been following you, and I do love the camaraderie with all the women. It seemed, and then I heard you say we compete together.
Yeah. And
so I think that is so interesting, because it is so easy to fall into like comparison and competition and with whatever we do, whether it's at work, whether it's on social media, whether it is even in ministry work, like it's easy to fall into this like competitive spirit, like we're trying to get ahead of the other person. So how have you dealt with that in pageantry and like with your competing with your friends and everything? Yeah,
that's a great question, because one of like the most famous pageant questions that judges will ask a girl is, why should we pick you? You know? And it is so easy to fall into the trap of beating the other women down in order to pick yourself up.
It's like politics.
And I think, and think about how many times I think men and women can feel this way of like, how often do we feel like we have to pump ourselves up and like advocate for ourselves at the expense of other people? And the reality is it doesn't have to be presented that way. And so there can be some delicacy in answering a question like that, but why is it so difficult? Well, because the world constantly is encouraging us to compete with each other, truly. Yeah. Right? So, and whether it's against each other, it's against the clock or against a title, like, you know, the next promotion, like, and it's just like, okay, wait, does it have to be like that? And one of my like mantras is choosing community over competition. And I think that speaks to the sisterhood of pageantry, because it truly is a community of women that are all vying for the same thing. Yes, but we're not vying for it at the expense of like the other women being losers. That's not how we look at it.
I love that.
It's walking in knowing that every woman on stage is deserving. There is only one winner, but that doesn't mean every single girl on that stage didn't have an equal chance of being the winner.
Amen. That's really good.
Yeah.
I love that. And so doing something that you love and like being who you are, it does take courage, because I remember even when I went to start this podcast, I was so nervous to like put myself out there on social media and to really truly be like my full self in front of people, whether it was my family or my friends. And it took a lot of courage to step out and do that. I remember, having to pray, having to talk to certain friends to like encourage me. So did you feel like that with going into the pageant world, or like how do you deal with that?
Oh yeah. And even just last night I had this moment of like self-deprecation where I'm like, oh, like I had this yucky moment of exhaustion, and yet I still like told myself like, okay, you still need to go to the gym. And then I went to the gym and I looked in the mirror and I had this like flash of body dysmorphia, as if I haven't already worked so hard. And, God gave me this body that is so able. Why am I being so harsh and critical of it?
Yeah.
And so I called my boyfriend and I said, I need you to like tell me that I'm doing the right things. Like I'm having a moment right now. And he's like, Jenna, like you just went to the gym, even though you just had a really long day. Like you've put in the work, like don't fall victim to that mentality of doubt, because like it's gonna be a fleeting moment. Like just move on from it and get back on track and get your focus where it needs to be. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. Okay. But like, I literally just had this yucky, emotional, weak moment where all of a sudden, like all the work I've put in and this confidence that I've built up and others have built up for me, like kind of how you were saying, like, I do have to make those phone calls. Like I do have to send pictures of myself to my best friends, because I'm like, do I look okay? Like, and this is another vulnerable thing, but I know like there's a lot of people who do it. Like social media presence, like I want my friends' opinions before I like post certain things, because I want to know like, hey, does this come off the wrong way? Or like, is this caption like depicting, like, do you get what I'm saying? Like if I'm making a joke or like a pun, like, does it come off the right way? Or like I don't ever want to come off as self-absorbed either. And so my friends keep me grounded in that. And so when I have those moments of weakness or self-doubt, like absolutely, like oh my gosh, I may have all this energy and like I have a lot of confidence, like thank God. But I definitely have those moments of just
weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to have trusted people around us and encouraging people. Like I remember calling, before I started this podcast, I would call my cousin and be like, I told her I wasn't going to do it. And she was like, what do you mean you're not going to do it? And she was just so encouraging, but I needed her in my life at that moment. And she's still in my life, but I really needed her during that time to be that voice of reason to say, no, like this is in you, like you got this, it's gonna be great, like don't care about what other people think, just go for it.
And you never know who that person's gonna be either, because like I know there's a lot of people that have good relationships with, like, let's say like a teacher, and like we probably all have that teacher that we grew up with that was like, ooh, like I really remember what they said and how it made me feel. And like for you, your cousin, like, okay, like your cousin telling you that in that moment is exactly what you needed to hear. And you may not have been anticipating it coming from her, but like, and it could be the same thing with a negative thing. Like, but those things are like core memories for you, right? But they can really be the thing that like lights the flame into getting you to pursue.
Exactly.
Or not,
And so I kind of want to go back to something you just said about like body dysmorphia. So how do you deal with that quite a bit? And then, I guess just I'm interested to hear more about that.
Yes. And I think I always have in one way, shape, or form. Like I remember I got made fun of, and maybe it was in a purely innocent, joking way. But I remember like my like friends of mine growing up like would say I had a boy body, you know, because I played soccer my whole life and I was very active, and so like, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on the podcast, but like I didn't become a woman until like late into high school. You know, so like I had this very athletic build, and like I remember being like made fun of and like said I have a boy body. I'm like, okay,
kids are so mean,
and like and these were my friends that were saying
you're
this
a
too.
kid,
like,
and you're beautiful.
Kids are brutal, but and I obviously like I have red hair and freckles, and I had glasses since I was in first grade, so I was bullied atrociously, brutally bullied. Like
wow.
it's so bad, and I honestly like thank God for still like helping me blossom into a confident young lady, because I honestly, it's kind of a miracle that it happened. And like, I can only thank God for that, because it's definitely not me. Like it's definitely not me. But in those moments where I'm like having that, like even just like last night when I was looking in the mirror, and there's been a lot of other moments too, where I've thought that like, man, I just wish I was X, or didn't have this, or wish I looked like her. And it kind of goes back to like our comparison stuff too.
Yeah.
And we could literally go on a tangent for a while about like social media and like the perception that gives too.
Right.
Because like how raw and real can you really be? Because like, let's be honest, like there is a 50-50 chance that people are going to be receptive to it. You know, that's just the truth. And you'd like to think that everyone loves you for who you are. And, but there's a lot of critical, judgmental people out there. And unfortunately for me, like one of those people is myself. And so some days are really good, and I'm proud of myself, and I'm proud of this body and my capabilities. And other days I'm like, oh, I just wish I could do 10 more minutes on the Stairmaster without feeling like I'm going to pass out, or like, oh, I wish I had the discipline to get up early and like read my Bible, or like just little things where it's not even about self-image. It's just about self. But in a way you have to be self-aware, and you need to have those moments of basically, and maybe it's God calling, it's basically you're calling yourself out. You know?
Yeah.
And what do you fall back on in those moments where you're calling yourself out? Okay, then what are you going to do about it?
Well, thank you for sharing that, because that had to be really hard to go through as a kid. And so many women deal with that, like comparing our bodies, and you're beautiful. Like, are you kidding me? Look
So
at
are
you.
you. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just think it's so cool how you like weightlift and everything, because I think it's so cool seeing women weightlift, because I think there's this idea that, oh, I'm going to get like bulky or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just think it looks so good when women weightlift, honestly.
Yeah.
And I love that you're like muscular and you have a great figure and everything.
Thanks.
So it's just so interesting how we end up. I think it is social media. We see all these different women. We see what, we see all these beautiful people, and then we end up looking at ourselves and being like, oh my gosh, I'm not like this, or I need to do this, or I need to lose weight here. We need to. Yeah, I think we all kind of deal with that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Or even like fashion trends, like, oh, like your body type may not necessarily be ideal for such and such style of whatever. So then what do? We think, oh, like, I wish I was. Like me, like sometimes I wish I was just even like 2 inches taller, Like I wish my legs were like a little less beefy. Like, well, at the end of the day, like this is the way God made me. And so like, I have to treat my body like the temple that it is. And some days it's easier said than done.
And I think you're right. It's snapping ourselves out of it. Like when we realize that we're comparing ourselves or we're putting ourselves down, we have to bring ourselves back to saying, no, like, am I comparing myself to someone? Am I being critical of myself? What would God say about me? God created me. So I am beautiful. Like he created this temple. Like you said, we are the temple of God. And like, how would he feel if we're beating ourselves up and talking low of ourselves?
Right. Because there's a point of grace, and then there's a point of accountability. And there's a very fine line in between those two things, right? So like we'll just bring it back to like health and fitness. Like, okay, if I'm feeling really sluggish one day, why am I feeling sluggish? Well, because maybe I ate some really indulgent food the day before. And so my energy levels are thrown off because of that. So at the end of the day, it's like, oh, like I shouldn't be mad at myself for not being able to perform to like the way that I'm used to performing. What did I do to cause that to happen? So there's that point of accountability too. Like, okay, yeah, I'm not saying you have to eat clean 24/7. Like, go ahead and like indulge every once in a while for sure. But to your point, like there's a point of grace where it's like, okay, like, you know, God intended for our bodies to be, and our bodies are so capable. And, you know, it doesn't have to be this 24/7, like cryptic, clean, active, like God knows we have life and, you know, we can choose what to do with that every day.
Yeah. And there's always going to be people that are maybe like prettier, smarter, or, you know, different than us, and we shouldn't always be trying to be someone else. Like really just accepting ourselves as God's creation, made in the image of God. Yeah. And I think that brings us back to center. I had that thought on the way into work today where I was literally thinking like there's always going to be something more that we could compare ourselves to.
That's so true.
And it will drive you crazy if you're always trying to go more and more and more and more.
That's so true. Yeah.
But then you're right. It's like a balance of we want to be healthy. We want, we want to feel our best. Right. But there's a point of we don't want to take it too far.
Right. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even sometimes I wish that I was like this, chill, calm individual. Like I literally remember telling Jackie that one time. I literally told her that. I was like, I just wish I had your demeanor. She is just so cool, calm, and collected, right? And I'm sitting over here like bouncing off walls all the time. And I just sometimes wish I could just be this calm person.
But it's like God created you with this big like, personality seriously. For a reason.
Yes. Yeah. Like if people ask me like, okay, like what do you think your like spiritual gift is? I honestly think that it is my energy. And like God uses my energy to impact the lives around me. I think that's what my spiritual gift is.
Yeah. That's so good though. And I'm happy that we brought this up because I would challenge whoever's listening to ask yourselves like, what are the gifts that God has given you that make you unique? Yeah. And are you trying to like change those? Have you been kind of pushing those down and kind of bring those back up? Because you are who you are for a reason. Yeah. And God gave you those specific personality traits for a reason.
For sure.
And I just think that's super important to not always be trying to be something else. I remember when I first started in corporate America, and I'm in account management, so I manage partnerships. But I was trying to be kind of like the other like men in the business, where I was like trying to be this serious business woman. And then one day I'm like, I'm not connecting with these people. I'm not getting a strong relationship with these people. And something just went off in my mind where I was like, okay, I need to be myself. Yeah. And so I started really just being myself around the people that I was working with, and started being like, how are you? How are your family? Like, what'd you do last night? Being like my bubbly self. Yeah. And my relationships changed completely at work, and I started doing better at work. I started being more effective because I finally was like, oh yeah, this is me. I don't have to try to be someone else.
100%. Yeah. I've had that same thing even with like pageantry too. Like it's so easy to want to fit the mold in order to get the success you're seeking, right? Like, and even for you, like, okay, I want to like fit in at work, right? Like, or even for me, like with work, same thing, But at the end of the day, like, gosh, I've said this before too, like I would so much rather lose being myself than win or succeed being something that I'm not.
And it
like fake it till you make it. Who made that up? Because once you make it,
you can't fake it anymore, and you won't want to, and you'll go crazy.
Right. Yeah.
That's so good. And like before this podcast, I remember my pastor knew that I was starting a podcast, And you think when it's like a Christian, you know, I talk about my faith a lot and everything. So you get kind of nervous. You're like, do I have to act a certain way? Because it's like a Christian thing, you know? Do I have to act a certain way? Do I have to present myself a certain way? Because Christian people can be brutal. And it's like, girl, like, I'm human. Like, chill out, you know?
Totally.
But I remember my pastor was like, just be yourself.
Yeah.
And that helped me so much because even on social media, I think some people might think I'm kind of out there and, you know.
Sure.
But it's like, this is me. This is who I am. I'm not trying to be this nun or this perfect person. You know what I mean? Like,
and we all know, like, okay, like, who does God pick to, like, fulfill his purpose? He does not pick the perfect people because there is no such thing.
Right.
You know, like, Jesus was the only perfect being. And at the end of the day, like, he picks the flawed, like, because that's all a part of the story.
Yep. So it's so good. Just be yourself. That's like the big takeaway so far is be yourself.
Yeah. It's hard. Some days it's hard.
It is hard.
It's hard because at the end of the day, we all want to be liked and we all want to find ourselves and find our purpose. And, you know, it's really easy to get caught up in all the different voices. Yeah. And, I mean, we know who we should be listening to. Just sometimes, you know, it's like playing telephone. What message that actually gets relayed, you know, and what are we willing to listen to?
So how have you found your passions and really stuck with them? And do you feel like you're walking in your purpose or
Oh my gosh, wow. That is a loaded question.
I know.
That is such a loaded question. I'm going to be totally honest. Mm-hmm. I have been this whole podcast, but really vulnerable, I should say. Do I think what I'm doing professionally is my calling and my purpose? No, I don't. I definitely would rather be doing something that impacts more lives on an intimate level than working in the automotive industry. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, my job is great and the perks of the job are great, but do I feel fulfilled each and every day? No. Which we were kind of like getting into this a little bit earlier about like work-life balance and like all these things. Like, my life is so exciting and, you know, all these things, but that's because I don't find my life value through my job. And maybe there's something to be said for that because I don't feel like it's my life purpose. And I would honestly love to be a like professional mentor, presenter, and coach for young women. Like, that is my like ideal. Like, I think that is what my purpose is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And I would love to be able to walk into that. And I do hope that if I were to win Miss Michigan USA next month, that can be my catapult into fulfilling that purpose. And I hope and pray that it is. And even if it's not, I hope that God will, you know, find a way to like steer me in that path.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, my personal life, I feel like, has evolved a lot as an adult. And I feel like that is more and more walking in my purpose with Christ and with what his plan is for me. But professionally, there's definitely some work that to be done.
Well, as you're talking, and I feel like this never really happens like on the podcast, but as you're talking, I honestly am seeing like footsteps. And I feel like God does have you on the path to everything you're doing now is preparing you for where you're going. So it seems like you are walking in your purpose, even though it's not your destination. Even your business work that you're doing right now, it's all preparing you for where he's taking you and the impact you're going to be making.
Yeah, true. It very well could be. And it's just like anytime you're in like that valley, right? Or in that like waiting period, it is like it's hardest thing to be in. And whether that's your professional life or your personal life, relationships, whatever it is, like that waiting period is so hard. And so I feel like I'm actively in this like valley of waiting of, all right, like I need something in my life to change professionally to feel like that fulfillment. And you know, maybe it's up to me to find it and chase it. And I'm hoping that I'm chasing it in the way that God wants me to.
So how have you dealt with waiting so far? I guess
I'm a very impatient person.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I'm always so active, honestly. Yeah. I'm always doing something all the time. And I have a hard time sitting still, and I have a hard time sitting in silence. So being in a period of waiting is very difficult for me.
It is.
And I'm definitely not the type of person that wants to rush the process necessarily. But I'm always thinking like, okay, progress is good. Progress is good. So when I'm at a standstill, it doesn't feel like progress, right? So I'm like, all right, we need to do something. We need to make a step forward. And the waiting time could be, and usually is, a step forward. But in the moment, it sure as heck does not feel that way.
In the moment, it's so hard. But what I've realized, and all throughout the Bible, is the waiting period is key.
Yeah.
It's literally what grows our faith.
Yep.
It builds character. And if we can understand that in the waiting, it is part of the plan. Like, it sucks. Like, waiting sucks sometimes. Like, I mean, you guys know, I've been in a waiting period for a while, like waiting for my husband, my family, like all that.
Yes.
But if we just be where our feet are at, like, and try to really be where our feet are at, I think that things can really like shift. But it's very challenging.
Yeah. It's hard to stay rooted where you are when you so badly want to not be where you are.
Yeah.
You know, like we all want that next thing. And so, so it's something I'm sure many of the listeners too are probably working on in their own, respective lives. And for me, like, the waiting is, to what you said earlier, is so spot on. Like, talk about building character. And I mean, I'm a completely different woman than I was 2, 3, 5, 6 years ago since graduating college. Like, I'm a completely different person. And so if I got the things that I wanted at the time when I was asking God for them, oh my gosh, no. I mean, I'd be a completely different person.
Yep.
So in that time of waiting, or that time of no, is that time of preparation.
Yeah.
Right.
It is. So I guess we've been for 40 minutes. This is such a good, good conversation. I know we've been talking about so much. We've been covering a lot.
Yeah, we could literally talk. I feel like there's so many things that we could still talk about.
Yeah.
But, okay.
I know. I guess as far as like professional life, like dating, like you're in a relationship, like Miss America, pageants, and then like pursuing just everything else you're doing.
Yeah.
How do you balance all of that?
Yeah. Knowing what to prioritize and when.
And your health, because I know you're really into like health and fitness. And stuff.
I will say that my my parents were pretty, I would say, dedicated to raising my siblings and I to take care of ourselves when it comes to health, especially. So that was rooted in me from the beginning, to have that example set and live by that example, which is actually something that my dad, this is kind of a side tangent, but that's something that my dad always prayed over me, is that I would be an example to those around me. And
I love that.
I think, but that also kind of goes back to like, okay, why do I ask for counsel? Why do I ask for advice? Why do I have mentors? Like, why do I have people in my life that I lean on in my weak moments, or my like moments of like, where I need assurance? It's because at the end of the day, like, I want to be a good example, and I want to live out my life's purpose in the way that God wants me to. And sometimes I need like a little gut check.
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely not a perfect person. And there's times where I've said things or done things or acted upon things. And it's just like, why did I do that? Knowing darn well that wasn't a good example of Christ. Right. But ultimately, how I can try to keep my life balanced with all these different facets is knowing that God is rooted at the center of what I'm supposed to be doing. And so if at any point that I feel like, oh, like God's not in this, it's pretty darn easy for me to pull away. Which is why, like, with my career, like I have never had a moment, and like thank goodness I have not experienced any sort of like discrimination in my work, for example, or like in my personal life with my friendships, like the ones that I know are like grounded and rooted, and we have like that faith foundation, that friendship, like those friendships are strong, you know. And same can be said with my relationships. Like I think one of the best things that happened to me last year, other than buying my house, was getting out of a 4-year relationship. And so knowing that like I so badly wanted God to be a part of that, and I just felt like there was a huge disconnect there. So for me, how do I keep it all straight and narrow? Sometimes it's not so straight and narrow. I try really hard. But I know deep in my soul what God like wants me to do. And like, I have confidence when I'm doing those things. And when I don't have confidence in those things, it's like, okay, like that's like, you know, people say, oh, it's it's your conscience speaking. Well, like that's the Holy Spirit speaking, right? Like, you know, who am I listening to? So, but I believe that everything happens for a reason. And like all those waiting periods, or like the times where I didn't get what I wanted or prayed for, or like the no's that I received, or like the relationships that didn't work out. Like at the end of the day, like there's so much more good that God has brought into my life because of those things. And like, ultimately that's what keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. That's so good, because I feel like I'm at that point in my life where I want to be walking in God's will.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard. Everything that we're doing that's not where God is leading, it just feels like we're in a uphill battle.
Well, and the way of the world, right?
Yeah.
Because like the way of the world doesn't value the same things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to be constantly surrounded by literally the uphill. Like that's what it is. Like the mountain keeps growing, right? And like we keep trying to climb it. And like that's where that faith, trust comes in, that like God can move that mountain.
Yeah.
You know, he can break through that despite what the world tries to convince us otherwise.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay close to God and like intimate communication with him, so we can see like where is he leading us.
Yeah.
Because then we'll have grace to pursue that. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Is there anything else on your heart that you feel led to share?
Oh my gosh,
or like advice?
I'm gonna try to channel my like inner like cool cucumber, and just, you know, like yesterday I literally prayed to God about like knowing when to have the words, and like knowing when to be silent. And I think you and I have said a lot of like good things that like, yeah, like hopefully those are like the words of God, you know, coming, you know, through us. And I think the impact is there, and I don't have much else to say.
I love that prayer though. Like that, what you just said, I think that is what someone probably needs to hear. Because we're talking a lot about business today, but I remember being in I remember working with this woman, and she always sounded great. And she was always in these business meetings, like talking a lot. But I remember one of my mentors at work was like, he told me specifically, he was like, it doesn't matter like how much you talk. It matters the words you say.
So true.
So
quality over quantity.
She seems like she's saying a lot of good things, but it's like, it doesn't need to be like, what exactly are you trying to say? And that's what you should say. Yes. Like, especially in business, because there's so many people that are just these charismatic like talkers and all this stuff. But it's like, okay, what are you really trying to tell us? And and like stick with that. Yes. So I love that prayer because it's a challenging thing to do, because we want to talk, we want to share our stories, but it's like, what am I really trying to get across?
Right. And I find myself,
that's a good prayer.
If I'm in a conversation and I'm talking 90% of it, that's not a conversation. You know, like that's just straight up. Mm-hmm. And so that's been one of my like New Year's resolutions, or things that I need to, you know, work on in myself, is being a better listener. And so like praying that prayer, like that's an important one for me to, okay, like Lord, help me find the words, but man, really help me find the silence. Like please help me find the silence, because it's way easier said than done. And like, sometimes I just will not stop talking. And so like, it literally takes like God to get me to just.
Well, I love that you're being open and sharing that with us because we all have areas that we can do better in. And
for sure.
And a lot of times we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know? So, and we can all be better listeners. We can all be better listeners.
Totally.
Because, you know, it's hard sometimes to not want to just talk about ourselves or really want to like zone in and hear like, what is this person actually saying? Like when I ask, how are you? Do I really want to know how they are?
Right.
Like,
are you listening to understand?
Are you listening to do you really want to know how I am?
Right.
And that's hard to learn, to listen. I think all of us, that's a good thing all of us can work on.
It is, especially our generation too. We are so distracted. And we are, you know, our senses are stimulated all the time. And and it's really hard just to be present and be, you know, in that silence.
Yeah.
God, it is so hard.
Yeah. And I remember even praying, like, Lord, help me really want to understand others and like love them more.
Yeah.
Because I think early in our faith too, you see these people that are so like, they just want to help everyone and they're so like on fire for God and for other people, like helping other people. And it's not always natural to want to help and love other people. Like sometimes we just want to say to ourselves, like, that's just natural.
Yeah.
But I remember praying that, like, Lord, help me like see people differently, help me love them more, help me want to help them more.
Yeah, that's
and I did feel like naturally over time that has come more.
Oh, good.
After that. So he answers those prayers. He does. And he helps us with that.
Oh, yeah. He answered my silence prayer yesterday. I was in a meeting with a very important person and oh my gosh, I'm so glad that God shut my mouth. Like, I'm just putting it plainly. I'm so glad that like literally God, it's like he's like just said, you don't need to be the one that's always like, you don't always have to have something to say. Like it's almost like that's what he was telling me. It's like you do not always have to be the one that says something.
Wow.
Because sometimes silence, you know, speaks louder than words, right?
It does. And we're always praying, Lord, speak through us. But I think that is so good. Like, Lord, help me to not speak when I don't need to speak. Yeah.
Yes. Right?
That's needed. That's a really good prayer.
Yeah.
I'm happy you brought that up.
Yeah. I'm probably going to pray that the rest of the week now, honestly.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And we all need to pray that. That's so good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we want to just fill the space too. So I love that. And okay, you said you're doing Miss Michigan soon.
Yep.
Is there anything we can do to help with that?
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. So the competition is in Port Huron on April 21st. Tickets will go on sale for that, I think, like at the end of March. As far as like, honestly, the best way you can show support is like going on social media and liking the girls' photos. And you might be surprised there might be a girl that you know that's competing. But like there's a ton of presence going out leading up to the pageant. And it doesn't even have to be just for me. Like these girls, a lot of them, it's their first time competing. So anyone listening, like if you can go on the Miss Michigan USA Instagram or Facebook page and like when the headshots get announced or like when People's Choice gets announced, like even just some of these girls honestly just need to know that other people like support them putting themselves out there on stage. So for me, like I'm happy to have my community in my corner supporting me. But if there's anything that you can do, honestly, it's to show support and love, even just by liking another girl's headshot. Like I know it may seem like a little like maybe it feels uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, like some of these girls actually like just need to know that
support.
Like, that this is a scary thing that they're doing. It takes a lot of courage and, even if it's complete random strangers that like say like, oh, like good luck, ladies, you all look beautiful, or you know whatever, you know, like
cool.
That, you know, it kind of goes back to like our initial statement about like you never know what you're being told by somebody or something that we say could be a pivotal moment for somebody else. It could be a complete stranger, you know, that encourages someone, and that's what you know keeps them coming back, or like keeps them from like you know backing out from doing it.
Yes, and we should be supporting other women. That's the kind of women we want to be supporting other women. For sure. And competing together, like you said earlier. Yeah. And I mean, we're not competing in the pageant, but I mean, supporting each other and being there for each other. So 100%. We'll leave those links below So go like those photos and yeah, let's support. And also, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Jenna Holt 8. And you can actually find me on Facebook at the same way. My link is the same thing. Those are really the main platforms I use. Like, if you find me on TikTok, it's like a bunch of random CrossFit videos. So you're not, it's not. But Instagram is definitely my main social media platform where I'm the most present.
Cool.
So,
and her Instagram's so cool.
Oh
So just follow her. I'll leave all her links below because I have so much fun looking at your
I said,
your
it's
shots
literally
and
a
glamour
box
shots.
of chocolates. Like, you do not know what you're gonna get. Like,
And then I love like the crown. I'm coming for you. I love those. They're so good.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, yep.
I'm like, oh dang, she's going for that crown. Like I love watching your Instagram.
Yep.
So cool.
Raw and glam and everything in between.
It's awesome.
That's what you're gonna get on there. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Jenna, for joining. It was so
so
fun
happy
talking
we
with
finally
you.
got to do this.
So much good conversation.
So great.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back in the future.
I'd love that. Maybe we can rope Jackie into being in the
I
middle
know,
of us on this couch right now.
Our mutual friend.
And get literally, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I'm so glad. Thanks for having me.
I hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode with Jenna. I know I did. And I just want to remind you before you go to make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, write a review on Apple. I would so much appreciate it if you left a rating, a 5-star rating. That is how the algorithm reaches more people. And make sure to share with a single friend, share with someone you think this show would encourage. And don't forget, we are on YouTube. You can watch the show there. And make sure to follow me too on Instagram and TikTok. That's where you can see all the updates that are happening with the show. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will talk soon.